Hello Internet, so nice to see you. Is it possible to play super complex chords on your guitar when you have distortion on and still make them sound soul-crushing metal, but at the same time retain all the clarity and complexity of the chord? Turns out, yes, it is possible. And this is important because what will be the point for us to learn all these complex harmony and all those interesting chord progression with complex chords if then we cannot play them on our guitar? What will be the point of even studying harmony on guitar if the only thing we could play would be simple power chords? Well, there wouldn't be a point, indeed, because if you can never play it, why should you study it? But here's the point. There is a way. It is super simple, and once you know it, it's just easy, okay? So I'm going to explain to you exactly how to do it. I'm going to take a fairly complex chord progression, okay? Not super complex, okay? Not super dissonant either, but it contains chords that if you just naively play them on guitar with distortion, they sound horrible. And I'm going to do that so you can hear also how horrible they sound. Chord progression is a Baroque chord progression. I've already explained it in another one of my videos. You'll find the link on the top right. It sounds this way. I'm playing it with 3 voices right now, with clean guitar. It sounds this way. As it is right now, not the most metal thing ever, okay? Now, the chords in this progression are interesting, and again, I'm not going to explain the whole theory behind it, but the chords are in order a C major chord, an F major 7th with a bass of A, so in first inversion, then a B diminished. This is a diminished chord. Played with distortion, it will sound very unclear. Then I have an E minor 7th with a bass of G, which would be this. Then I'll have an A minor. Then I'll have a D minor 7th with a bass of F. Then a G. And then C. And again, that's in 3 voices, meaning I'm playing 3 notes for every chord. I could play the full complete chords by adding a little bit of... by adding the missing note, essentially, okay? Just a bit harder to play. That's why I'm going slower, okay? And just to make it clear, what if I at this point just do the naive thing and I just slam on some distortion, used my bridge pickup to give it a bit more bite, okay? And I just play this whole thing with distortion. Well, it's gonna sound absolutely horrible. I mean, maybe you like it, but for me, this is absolutely horrible, okay? There is no clarity, there's a lot of fizz. It really doesn't, and it's not soul-crushing, it's not powerful, it doesn't really work for me, okay? So just playing all those notes, okay, into a distortion pedal doesn't really sound good to me. But there is a solution. So here's the thing. And it's important that you guys understand how we are thinking so that you can replicate this with any other chord progression. So we need to understand what happens when you play notes inside a distortion pedal, into a distortion pedal, okay? And let's think about playing only 2 notes. That's key, okay? You want to play only 2 notes into a distortion pedal. Well, music theory teaches us that there are 3 kinds of intervals, okay? And I'm going to call those 2 notes... those chords of 2 notes that are technically called dyads, but I'm going to call them intervals right now because it's just easier in this situation. So there are 3 kinds of intervals: perfectly consonant, imperfectly consonant, and dissonant. Perfectly consonant are octaves, fifths, perfect fifth, and perfect fourths. Those intervals tend to sound very good with distortion. Indeed, power chords are perfect fifths all the time because they sound good, but we can also play octaves and fourths. Those intervals sound great with distortion because they really pack a punch, okay, and they don't get unclear. Distortion keeps the clarity of those intervals. So for instance, a perfect fifth is this, power chord, and a perfect fourth would be this, which is an inverted power chord, okay? Octave sounds even better. even if a bit empty. Okay? Then we have imperfectly consonant interval. Those are major and minor third and major and minor sixth. In this case, the distortion tends to break up a little bit more, okay, but we still retain enough clarity. So for instance, a major sixth would sound like this. Okay, a minor sixth would sound like this. See, it breaks up a bit, but it's acceptable. Major third would sound like this, and the minor third tend to break up even more. Some people love those, some people don't like those, up to you, but it's just an intermediate thing. And then we have the dissonant interval, which are seconds, sevenths, and any kind of augmented or diminished interval. Those intervals tend to play havoc with distortion, which doesn't mean it's not musical. It's just that the clarity goes a bit out of the window, because, for instance, you have minor seconds which sound this way. And I mean, maybe you like this sound, maybe you are a death metal fan and you like this kind of sound, and I'm not saying anything about that. If you like it, you like it. It's right if you like it, but the clarity, especially when you pile up more notes, it's gonna go down. It's gonna be harder to hear all those notes because they conflict with each other, and distortion just amplifies the conflict. So I'm not here to tell you to not use these dissonant intervals or imperfectly consonant intervals and use only perfectly consonant intervals. I'm here to tell you the clarity is greater when you use perfectly consonant interval, intermediate when you use imperfectly consonant, and there's less clarity when you use dissonance. And that's, again, a general guideline, okay? Just so you know where to go. There are exceptions, wherever you want. There's a general guideline. So what do we do now? We take the chord progression we had before, and we write down the notes of every chord. So for instance, in C major, I have C, G, and E. In the F major 7 with a bass of A, my notes are A at the bass, then F, C, and E on top. If I have a B diminished, I have B, D, F, and I'm writing all the notes of all the chords. Then I'm trying to do a voice leading of those chords, meaning I'm trying to connect the common notes between the chords and to move all the other notes the least possible amount while preserving the bass line. So the bass line stays where it is, but I can rearrange or double the notes on top to make every line be as smooth as possible and to move at as little as possible. Then I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to identify if between the notes that we have there are perfectly consonant intervals. Okay? And in this case, for instance, the two lines in the center create always a perfect consonant interval, because in the first chord, the central two lines are C and G, so a perfect fourth, if you think G at the bass. In the second chord, I have F and C, so that's a perfect fifth. In the next chord, I have F and B. That's a diminished fifth. It's not optimal. It will sound a little bit more dissonant, but that's just what the chord is. The next chord, E and B, I'll have a perfect fifth and a perfect fourth, a perfect fifth, a perfect fourth. On the last one, I will have a major third, but again, not a big problem there. So I have two lines that are mostly made of perfectly consonant intervals. The two lines that are left will give me a different interval. In the first chord, the two lines have the notes C and E. That's a major third. Imperfectly consonant, that's good enough. In the next chord, I'll have an A and an E. Oh, that's a perfect fifth. Sounds great. The next, I'll have a B and a D, minor third, okay. The next, I have a G and D, perfect fifth, okay. So here comes the trick. If I divide the notes of those chords between two different distorted guitar, each one of them can have an acceptable interval or an interval that sounds clear enough when I play it into a distortion pedal. And so we retain clarity, and the two guitars together play all the notes. So I could have one guitar play the two central line and the other guitar play the bass line and the top line. And of course, I can change the octaves however I want. There is nobody says I have to keep this vertical order of the lines, so I can rearrange it however I want and it will work. Now, with a little bit of experimentation, you also find that sometimes it's better to rearrange things in a slightly different way. So let me show you how I'm rearranging this to make it even clearer. Okay? Let me rewrite the chord progression. And let me rewrite 5 lines this time. The idea is that one line will be carried by the bass guitar, and I have 4 lines, of which 2 carried by one distorted guitar, and other 2 carried by another distorted guitar. So here's how it looks like. So the lowest line is the bass line, it's the original bass line, and the bass takes care of that. and the guitar doesn't care about that bass line. None of the guitar follows that line. Then we have those other two lines, the lower two lines of the guitar. Those are all perfect fourths and perfect fifth, except for the diminished fifth on the B diminished chord, because that's unavoidable. Everything else is perfect interval, so it will work great with distortion. Top two lines would be another guitar, another distorted guitar, and those are all thirds, except for the last interval that is a perfect fourth. So I have major thirds, then a minor third, then a minor third, then a major third, and then finally a perfect fourth. Thirds are imperfectly consonant, so it breaks up a little bit, but it's still acceptable. At minimum, I have a bass guitar playing the lowest note and two distorted electric guitar playing those two groups of notes. It will sound even better if I then double track those guitars, so I have two guitars playing those two lines and other two guitars playing those other two lines. Add a little bit of a drum track, and that's what you get. Now, that sound, powerful and clear, okay? I'm not using any other trickery here. I'm just playing whole notes, so you can hear all those notes. You can hear all the conflict between those notes when there is a conflict. You can hear all the problems that distortion creates, and this is way, way clearer than the previous example, okay? So the secret, if you want to play complex chords when you want to use distortion, is to separate the lines of the chords. And so first create the lines that take you to the chord. Create the voice leading, okay, that take you to the chord, and then separate those lines so that you have mostly either perfectly consonant intervals or imperfectly consonant intervals, and you avoid the dissonances. And just to make sure that you see them, let me show you one. If I take the F major 7 with a bass of A, I have the F note and the E note in those chords. And the F and the E, depending on how I arrange them, could be either a major 7th of distance or a minor 9th, which is a minor second, essentially, of distance, okay? I mean, formally speaking, it's still a dissonance, okay? And actually, the minor 9 probably sound worse than the minor second, depending on who you ask, okay? But the point is, they really conflict with each other. So if you put these F and E note together, played by the same distorted guitar, you're going to have a lot of break up in the distortion. Which again, if you like it, it's great, but if you want clarity, it's not that great. So I'm making sure that the F is played by one guitar and the E is played by another guitar. And if you see, that's exactly what I did in my arrangement, okay? So here's the trick. It's really not that hard. The first time you do it, though, it could be a bit slow because you may not be used in writing chords and recognizing intervals and arranging all this stuff so that it sounds good. The solution for that would be to take my course Complete Chord Mastery, where I talk a lot about voice leading and how to arrange those chords so that they're easy to play on your guitar. And yes, I do talk about how to play complex chords with distortion and make them sound good. Complete Chord Mastery, it's not a book. It's a complete video course that takes you from the basics up. We do everything you need to know about harmony and chords on your guitar. All the theory is done straight on the fretboard. There is no theory for the sake of theory here. Everything is immediately practical, and everything is developed through exercises, so you know how to apply these immediately on your guitar. If you have just a minute, click on the link on the top right to check out Complete Chord Mastery. If you like this video, smash on that like button and don't forget to subscribe and click on notification, otherwise YouTube will not let you know when I put up a new video. And if you have any comment, feedback, suggestions, write them down in the comment. I enjoy reading from you and I make videos on your suggestions. This is Tommaso Zilio of musictheoryforguitar.com, and until next time, enjoy!